Hey there, and thank you for tuning into the Designated Pundits. We are previewing each and every of the 30 Major League Soccer teams to preview the 2025 Major League Soccer season. We are here to talk DC United with Ted Meyer from the RFK Refugees. So we're getting to that time. We're hitting some teams that are in order of roster preparedness. So we thought today would be a great day. There could be no possible news for DC United. And of course, it's one of the biggest news days in the offseason. We are live on Tuesday, February 4th. Things change throughout the season, but this is where we stand today. Ted, thank you for joining us. Let us know one time where we can find your work.
Yeah, I host the RFK Refugees podcast. You can find us on Blue Sky. Search the RFK Refugees podcast. We're also on Threads, Facebook. We host a live show on YouTube, Twitch, wherever you can basically find live shows. And then, of course, our podcast is on all the podcasting apps. Just search RFK Refugees.
Love it. Now, old rivals of my New York Red Bulls for sure. I worked on TIFO crew. I don't think I've ever told anyone this story. But I was head of the TIFO crew for about 6 years at Red Bull Arena, and we made the raccoon with the hard hat. I think of that when I think of RSK Refugees. I mean, what a rundown, burnt-up stadium. That is knocked down finally, right?
It's still standing. They're planning to, I think, dismantle it some point soon and make way for whatever billion-dollar facility for the Commanders, but. It's still up there. It's still standing. It's still infested. All the lovely things that you remember about it all those years ago. So
it's the only park in Major League Soccer that you can go to and leave with a gift of cement wrapped around rebar. You can take your own piece of RFK home. Great to have you on. A little bit of a disappointing 2024 season for DC United. But we have to start the way we start every podcast this year, which is, what is your favorite soccer memory from 2024?
Boy, I guess the Nashville away game. This team at one point in the year, this team kind of fluctuated between, are they going to make the playoffs? Are they not going to make the playoffs? Early in the year, they started out great. They looked like they were really coming together under Troy Lesesne. We got towards the middle of the season, injuries started to pile up, things started to pile up, and then essentially the team basically fell apart in the summer. They got themselves back together, they got players healthy, they were able to make some signings, and then they entered a game against Nashville on the road where it looked like they needed a win, and they were down like 3-1 in this game. And you thought like the playoffs were done. Like you thought this was it. They're all done. They're all over. They made a furious 3-goal comeback at the end. 2 goals from, I think, Gabriel Pirani, including the winner, to win the game and to sort of shock Nashville on the road and keep sort of those playoff hopes alive. That game was probably one of the wildest games of the year and one of the biggest sort of comebacks. So. And the 4-3 score line reflects in the standings you're seeing right now with the goals scored versus goals conceded for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot. Now, finding the back of the net was not a problem. 52 goals is pretty reasonable. 70 goals conceded is 25 too many. You ended up with a 10-10-14 record, 10 wins, 10 draws, 14 losses, 4, 5, and 8 at home. With a 52 goals scored, 70 conceded. That's an 18-goal differential. You finished in 10th place in the East. You missed the playoffs on a tiebreaker with Atlanta, which I think was goals or goal differential. You would have had to have scored 20 at that point to make it. Some really interesting decision day action here for DC. Overall, 2024, there's a bit of a disappointment from the season. But if you look at the last 15 games, you guys were on fire. It was that middle stretch. I think it was 11 MLS matches without a win, and only 3 draws in that time. So I guess it was 3-8 in 3-8 in that span.
Yeah, that was due in large part 2024 was a intended mess. The mess of a roster was fully intended. This team um, has been plagued with just changing directions every single year. Really since Ben Olsen left in 2020, there hasn't been a clear, sustained direction, a clear, sustained build. And so 2024, this was supposed to be the second year of Wayne Rooney's coaching tenure. He was supposed to, he had an option year for the next season, but they had sort of constructed the roster like he was going to be back in 2024. Obviously, they got rid of Rooney. They brought in a new GM in Ali Mackay, a new coach in Troy Lesane. Regardless, they still had contracts. They had a ton of players: Christian Dahome, Martin Rodriguez, Matthias Klick, who had very little, if any, trade value. We'll get into a minute. They did manage to trade one player. And basically, they just said, we have to see some of these contracts out. They managed to buy out some players. They bought out Mohamed Yaz, who had a tumultuous 2023 with getting arrested in Sweden. Bought him out at least, and they made moves where they needed to do. They had, a contract to Steve Birnbaum that probably shouldn't have been here. They ended up having to buy him out. They were last years of Russell Canal. So this was very much a year of, we're going to make do. I'm going to try my best to, find signings where I can. And to his credit, he managed to put together a roster. You had Matty Petola, who was on something like $800,000 a year as a young DP. We wouldn't really classify him as a young DP, but he was there because they could bring him in and keep his cap hit low by making him a young designated player. So that was the nature. It was a mess. And to Troy's credit, he managed to get buy-in from Benteke. That's why he's the Golden Boot winner. He got buy-in from a lot of other players. The early part of the season was looking pretty promising. The injuries hit. They had to play, Dahome as a left back, Patola as a third center back. They had to change up their roster every single time because they had players dropping, coming back, international breaks. It really wrecked in that middle part of the year. That's why they were so bad. In that 11 win streak. They had 15 players on the roster and on the game day roster, including 2 goalkeepers. So it was not a good situation from a roster build. And then you saw once they got the summer window, they were able to refill some of those spots. They went back on a run and nearly made the playoffs. So that's 2024 in a nutshell.
So with this mismatched, strange roster build, you still have Benteke, 22 goals, 5 assists. Gabriel Pirani, 6 goals, 1 assist. Jared Stroud, 3 goals, 7 assists. Mateusz Klick, 2 goals, 5 assists. Teddy DiPietro, 2 goals, 4 assists. And Aaron Herrera with 1 goal and 4 assists. Not all these players are still with the team just today. Theodore DiPietro is on his way to, and I keep saying this, I keep messing it up, Colorado, I guess, to replace the big hole at left wing that they have there. And we'll talk about some incoming, outgoing players that make him not completely needed. You did address the left wing position elsewhere during the offseason, and at his age, I really, really like what he brought to the table. He's a player who's got to start every week. You don't want to sit him even for a day, to stunt his growth as a player. So I think that this might actually be kind of good for him and good for Colorado in the move, even if it's not good for DC in the long run, because this is a player years and years away from his prime. Let's talk about the contributors a little bit.
Yeah, so you've got Christian Benteke, obviously Golden Boot winner, 22 goals. The offense was him for the longest time. The running joke, in the months of June, July, was who was going to be the first player to score a second goal other than Christian Benteke. For a long time, it was like Christian Benteke on 11 goals and everybody else on 1 goal. So there was just not much as far as goals in the attack. The contributor, obviously, you look at these stats and say, Gabriel Pirani, 6 goals, 1 assist. Wow, as a young player, that sounds like pretty good. Sounds like he might have been a key contributor. A lot of those came off the bench. He was very good at being kind of like a change of pace guy, but you threw him into a 90-minute game and he really couldn't produce the same sort of magic that you saw out of when he came off the bench. Jared Stroud was a fantastic contributor. Also, we got him we got him and Lucas Bartlett in a trade for Chris Durkin. I think that's a trade most DC fans feel like, maybe it was beneficial to both ways, but DC got two big contributors. These are guys that are going to play a big role in 2025. And then you have the two that are no longer with the team in Matthias Click and Ted Pietro. The Click trade is somewhat of a controversial one in sort of underselling the dysfunction of how this team built their roster. He had an option year going into the end of the year. There was an option year, and essentially it was discovered that option was already exercised and was exercised from his contributions in 2023. So it was built into that contract. So just undersells how poor everything was at the time. So they were stuck with him for 2025, regardless if they want him or not. The trade itself wasn't great. And, now MLS is allowing a second buyout. Question marks as to whether ownership would have done that. Maybe this trade was the only way. They get roster relief. They will have to carry him as a designated player. It definitely stunts a lot of sort of big time growth. We'll get into maybe when we start talking more about the team, whether that was really in the cards. And then you have Ted Pietro, which was a shock, I think, to many fans. He's a much beloved player amongst DC fans. He had a absolute breakout season in 2023, was fantastic. Hurt in 2024. Injuries continue to be kind of the thing with him. Even in 2023, he had stretches where he would just pick up a knock and be out for 2 to 3 weeks. He had long stretches in 2024. Questions as to whether he fit his system. I thought the mess in particular DC had on the left side didn't help things. He had to track back a lot because you had Dahomey playing left, and Dahomey will defend sometimes, but also wants to get in the attack, and you had to cover for that. And then there's Aaron Herrera, who was a standout all-star, probably one of the best acquisitions last year.
So I think you guys did some really good incoming work, but we got to talk about the outcoming players now. This list could be about 6 times as long. I just kind of highlighted some of the players you might want to talk about. Outgoing, Bono, Russell Canaus, Christian Dahomey, Pedro Santos, Click went to Atlanta. We talked about that last time, and he meets his countryman, Slits, in the midfield there. Might be a nice change of pace for him. And Akinboni those players are, kind of the highlighted players out. Now you can add Di Pietro to that list. Coming in, Luis Barraza at goalkeeper, midfielder Jose Kijima. Is that
Kijima?
Kijima. Oh, just a simple thing.
Kijima, yeah.
Then you have Peglo, Lucas McNaughton, Randall Leal, and Kyle Rolls. Are there any other outgoing players that are going to be missed this season?
Obviously you can add Ted Pietro to that list. As far as other players that are missing, probably not. Again, the roster of 2024 was a roster that was going to be designed to be dismantled. One player I will mention, Russell Canaus, didn't contribute much to 2024. He actually was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, and had to have surgery and was out most of the year. He has been a real Iron Man for this team for a long time, a beloved player. And also you have Steve Burbom as well. Again, these players were injured a lot, but contributed a lot to the club and really were like the longest tenured players. And I think the only 2 players left that were still on the roster from like the RFK days. So that shows how long they've been in there. Russell, Steve Burbom was drafted in 2012 and Russell Canaus came in 2017. In that sort of last season at RFK. So I think there are players that will certainly be missed from a locker room and a culture perspective. As far as the incoming, I think one player you missed is we signed a U22 initiative goalkeeper from South Korea, Kim Jong Hung, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. He is already last couple preseason games, he's gotten a start. Charlie Sane has raved about him. Coming here from Korea is like really set on learning English. The team obviously has somebody to help him sort of adjust. But has already started to get looks. For right now, like, and again, I haven't really watched any games, but just based on what I'm hearing, I expect him to start this year. And I think he will be potentially a fantastic addition to the team and one to watch if you're somebody that's tracking. And no one's really spent money on a U22 goalkeeper before. So, it's new territory. Other players there, obviously Randall Leal. We know him from his time at Nashville. Kai Rawls, it's not Kyle Rawls, it's Kai Rawls, the Australian defender. Another solid player, played for, I think, was it, Hearts of Midlothian in the Scottish Premiership. So, big expectations for him to kind of be that lockdown center back.
Like it. So I'm put up a depth chart that I made this morning. This is not from anyone in the know. And in fact, I think there's a lot of roster building and a lot of movement that's going to need to be done. So, kind of take it with a grain of salt, but we needed something to talk about here. I do have Kim Jun Hong as the starting goalkeeper now with Luis Barraza behind him. I kind of have this 5 or 3-man back line here. Lucas McNaughton, Kai Rawls, Lucas Bartlett. You do have Garrison Tubbs, not a player I'm familiar with. That's a fantastic, fantastic soccer name for a center back. And Connor Antley. First of all, we haven't even discussed this. Do you see this looking something like a formation that you guys might trot out this year? And then second to that, the center back depth.
Yeah, there's been so much change. I'm anticipating, I think in the last preseason game, we saw them play a 4-2-3-1. So that was Kai Rawls, Lucas Bartlett as your center backs. Derek Dotson outright. Aaron Herrera is working himself back a little bit from an injury. And then David Schnegg out on the left with Peltola and Boris Enal as kind of the two defensive-minded midfielders. And then you had Peglo, Pirani, and Stroud with Benteke up top. That seemed to me like possibly the first indication of like this will be the starting lineup heading into the season. I think you sent that lineup out and I saw the notes and I'm like, I really don't know what this lineup's going to look like. There's a lot of change that's happened to this roster, a lot of players brought in. I do know with Peltola, they have talked about playing him he's played as sort of a center back. They definitely want to stick him into the midfield. I think Troy's looking at those 70 goals given up and maybe wants to play with like a 2 defensive midfielder setup with Boris and Peltola. Boris was brought in on a TAM contract, so theoretically he should be starting. And so I think that's possibly what he might be looking at. Questions then become, as far as the attack, that puts Pirani as the number 10. Can he play as a number 10? The guy's in the 23rd percentile in chance creation. It's up from being like the 1 percentile he was when he came here in 2022. And I think that's a question that's going to be driving with this Ted DiPietro trade, because Ted DiPietro was a pretty good chance creator. He wasn't like elite level, but he was decent and certainly could grow into it. And that's been a struggle for Pirani. So that's kind of been the question. I thought this year was going to kind of be Ted versus Pirani, who was going to be the starter. And now it's, looking like it's Pirani's show now, basically. And Tom Bogart has said the team is apparently looking at a new transfer. His speculation is that this Ted DiPietro trade will maybe invite and bring on another attacker. We'll see. The team has said we're done, but that could be, smoke and mirrors, and things can change very quickly. Maybe there was an offer out there.
Absolutely. So moving to that midfield, center back depth, who are your best 2 pair if you're going to go a 4-man back line?
It's Kai Rawls and Lucas Bartlett. Those are the expected starters. You've got your, big center back you just brought in. Lucas Bartlett, I think, has pretty much been given like the captain's armband as far as that goes. Troy Lesesne has raved about him. Definitely going to start. And then obviously your Aaron Herrera, David Schnegg, right and left back for sure. And then you essentially are 2 deep now. You have Lucas McNaughton and Garrison Tubbs kind of as your 2 deep in center backs. And, Connor Antley and Derek Dotson kind of covering each of the wing backs. And that's kind of been the notion of this roster. It's not a flashy roster. by any stretch, but it is certainly a more balanced roster than we had last season.
All right, like to see that. Now moving into the midfield, we're just kind of taking guesses at this point.
Yeah.
4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1 is a little different than what I was prepared to talk about today. But let's talk about this midfielders and what each bring to the table. Do you see anyone as a clear Peltolo? We're looking at as like a clear 6. Is that going to leave Kojima Pirani as like being the 8 and Pirani and being the 10 that he's never played before? Is that how we're kind of seeing things?
Yeah, I don't know if, I don't know. The 4-2-3-1, you could conceivably play Pirani as kind of a more withdrawn forward. I think the big knock against him, expecting him to play the 8, his defensive work rate is not the greatest. Now, maybe that's something that's improved this year. I'm not in training. I don't really know. I think Patola is definitely your 6. He's definitely your more defensive-minded midfielder. And Borisino was kind of the other, maybe slightly surprising player they brought in last year. He looks like he has a little bit more of a tendency to be a little bit more of a ball progressor. Still very much a defense-minded midfielder, but maybe can shift more into that 8 role. I think this team is going to be kind of built this year in that midfield to, cover defensively, press into that space that might be created between the attack and the defense. And then they're still probably going to look to get the ball wide to either Peglo or Stroud. That seems to me the idea. And then you've got kind of Pirani maybe occupying sort of a little more attacking freedom, kind of buzzing around Christian Benteke. So I still expect this team to be very much built to get the ball to Benteke. Maybe they're going to try to be a little bit more varied, at least, mostly Benteke, but maybe with a little more structure sort of around it. Because last year it was very much get across, look up, find Benteke's head, try to hit his head, and you'll probably end up with a goal. So
let's move up to the wings, or kind of the outside midfielders here. You have Peglo and Stroud seem to be your favorite pairing, but I'm a Randall Leal guy. I kind of think, you went out and got him. You gotta play him here. Let's talk about the depth on the wings and what you think that their responsibilities are going to be. Obviously, you see in this depth chart, they're not very wide wingers from what I had. Obviously they can go out there. Jared Stroud, loves throwing those crosses and did it quite well for a bunch of last season. He is a Red Bull player that I've seen for a very long time. It's nice to see him, finally putting something together and getting himself on a projected team sheet. So I just want to know what you think about the wing position here.
Well, you talk about Randall Leal, I will say he was sort of brought in. I think it was definitely, he was waived by Nashville. He's had some injury issues. He's had some, issues staying healthy. DZ's paying him like a senior minimum contract. So cap wise, he's not taking very much. So this was definitely a low risk, potential high reward. If Randall Leal can show up and play the way he played in 2022 and, link up like he did, like with Benteke, like he did in Nashville, then yeah, it'll look like an absolutely crazy move and a great move. And he will probably work his way into the starting position, maybe out left. If Peglo doesn't quite come together. I will say right now, I think there will be some questions about his health. He just coming off a season-ending injury. I think there's been some questions about his fitness amongst Nashville fans. We'll see. I think it was definitely a smart move. It was a need that Mackay needed to fill, and it's great that we got him at the fee we got him at. Like, you're basically paying nothing. It almost makes up for the fact that you traded away Click. You have to hold the DP slot. You basically got a DP in. He was a DP, he's low level, but you got a DP in and you didn't have to pay a DP price to bring him in. So,
and if I'm not mistaken, you still have one DP slot. One is taken, one is occupied, one is Benteke. Is there a third complete spot open?
We'll see. They right now they have said they are going for the 2-4 plus GAM, the 2 and 4 U22s. They now Teku DiPietro was a U22, so he was the third U22, with Kim Jong-un being one and Gabriel Pirani being the other. Now they have two U22 slots. I don't know if there are any changes that are coming for that. You do get the extra, million in GAM. And then if you keep that, you'll get $1 million in GAM, in the summer. They basically got $1 million in GAM because they sold him via the new cash trade system. You can buy into that. You can buy into that with GAM. So we'll see if that holds. I have to feel you make a move like this, maybe there's something that's changed in the air. Maybe there's a player out there that, you want to get. They're out of international slots, so I don't know if they're looking domestically. I don't know, maybe a reunion with Griffin Yao. Who knows?
Well, when
Who knows at
you're
this point?
flush with GAM, you can get yourself an international spot. That shouldn't be an issue at all, right?
Fair. Well, it depends on who's available because some teams are still signing players, so depends on
Let's
what
move
you
up
can
top
get.
and talk about the striker position. Christian Benteke, we know what he is, still a star at this position, still going to score 20 goals. Behind him, Jacob Morel, who scored a couple times last year. He threw me off because every time I saw his name, like on FOTMob or something, like, oh, Moriel finally scored. Look at Orlando doing something. Nope, not that guy. Morel, Jacob. And behind him, Dominic Baji, is he still on the squad?
Yep, he is. He was signed. He was brought in the summer. Yeah, I think with Jacob Murrell, he's a Georgetown guy, so local guy from the area. He came onto the scene and looked pretty promising. It kind of faded as the year went on, but I think he picked up a goal kind of in his first couple of starts. He's a dark horse, I would say, to watch. Dark horse to watch as far as a player. Second year, can he get comfortable? The team's other draft pick is out. Karamoko, who they signed who they got from NC State. So there's a little more potential in that attack, and maybe he can break through. Baji, I think, will just he's a spot starter. He's a guy to bring on when you want to give Benteke a rest. So I think that's his role, and I think he's fine to play that role.
Now, I have three storylines to watch for the 2025 season, and these are not necessarily questions. I put them as questions, but they're just things we're going to follow that I wanted to take note of. First, what will it take to get DC to the playoffs? You guys missed on a tiebreaker, but that tiebreaker seemed like it was a million miles away. Needed to win that match. What is the most likely course? Is it winning more than 4 home games? Maybe. I mean, like a fifth win, a 5-5, a 5-4-8, or a 5-5-7 would have got you across the line. That's got to be what it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think what it's going to take is, if I think what the reason the roster, what Mackay, I think, is betting on. Last season, Troy Lesane took a roster that didn't make sense, got them to buy in, and got a lot of players to elevate their game than they had previously. And I think he saw that, and he was like, okay, if he can match that again and we can have a roster that makes more sense and he can get guys that to elevate themselves. I mean, Benteke, no one was talking about Benteke being a Golden Boot winner last year. And he made that guy a Golden Boot winner. Jared Stroud played probably one of his best years. Aaron Herrera, came back. So, he was able to get a lot of buy-in from that team. I think it's going to be, to make the playoffs, it's going to be capture some of that same magic, stay healthy. So capture some of that same magic you had early in the season, stay healthy, and then give up fewer goals. 70 goals is not a way to make the playoffs. It would have been 67 goals if they had won their last game probably and made the playoffs. So still too many goals. I think it's going to be, can they prevent? They got themselves into a lot of shootouts and a lot of games where they were up 2-0, and then they would suddenly let a team back in. So I think it's going to be on the new signings with Kai Rawls and even David Schneck from last year, who we didn't get to see a lot. Can they solidify that team? Can Peltola step up? Very talented player. Had a good start to the year and then faded as it got hot. He is from Finland after all. And then then I think got better as the year went on. So it's going to be giving up fewer goals and sort of trying to maintain that attack. And I think if they can do those types of things, you could see this team make the playoffs They're going to be on the bottom of a lot of predictors. A lot of predictors are going to have them 14th, 15th, wooden spoon contenders. I see a lot of that. I'm hopeful that the roster build and the players they can sign can play higher than maybe what their expectations are, or what people think there might be their expectations. And it's going to be a real test for Mackay too, because he made these decisions. You can't really blame this anymore on, past roster decisions. You made the decision to trade Click. You made the decision to, sell Teku to Pietro. Now it's all on you to make sure that it works out. And with a lot of the players he's brought in, a lot of them are going to need to hit if this team is going to need to make the playoffs. And that's always a tricky proposition.
But I've seen a lot of Troy Lesesne teams play. As 80% of his pro club matches when he was with Red Bull. And one thing that was true with all those is that they were all defensively sound. It was the scoring that you couldn't make up. But with a guy like Christian Benteke, it's not a matter of, hey, let's let the coach scheme him open. No, you know who to give the ball to, get up there and do it. So I do think that in his second year with Lesesne, if this defense isn't drastically improved, he should be on the hot seat in the first 15 weeks because this needs to be fixed now. And I think that you kind of got the guy to do it. So switching to a 4-2-3-1, I could see that minimally impacting the offense while still paying dividends on defense, right? So my next question here, can DC produce a secondary goal scorer? I'm going to say with Pirani at the number 10, that's a no from me. It's just going to be keep feeding Benteke. Do you see it kind of the same way right now?
I mean, I still have hope that they can produce some sort of secondary scoring. I think if it is all on Benteke, you're risking, can you get that magic twice that you had last year? Benteke is a freak. I mean, you look at the amount of aerial wins he has. I think the key is going to be he can still be a part of the team and maybe the goal scoring chance. This team played a lot of, high over the top balls to him for him to win with his head. And they didn't really do a good enough job last year getting on the end of those. They did it some, but finding that player that can kind of be that Benteke whisperer when he's going up for a ball, in between the 18-yard box and the midfield line, and then he lands down that header. Can there be somebody that can then get that ball, start an attack? And maybe that's your start where Benteke is still a large part of it, but he's not the one getting on the end of the goals. You're able to sort of build an attack from his ability to sort of win the ball in higher areas of the field. So, as far as he could be second,
and he's demanding center back attention. You can't let him alone in the box. So maybe someone else can sneak by. The one thing I like about Christian Benteke, 9+ seasons of 10 goals or more. He's not a guy who, my Red Bulls looking at Timo Werner, guys like that already signed Choupo-Moting, guys who look really good. They get nice FIFA cards every once in a while, but what have they done on the field? But for Benteke, it's goals. It's goals everywhere, every level, every team. It doesn't matter if it's Aston Villa or Crystal Palace or any of the teams in Belgium that he's done it for. He's a goal scorer. And I think that for him, because he doesn't do it with speed, is not going to fade with age. I think as long as he's healthy and on the field, you can pencil him in for 15 and then, the plus is the bonus, right?
Yeah. I think he has the juice for, I won't say a 20-goal season. I'd say if he has another 15-goal season, he will have done his job. And I say if he's in that 10 to 15 range, I think the hope is that there are other players that are contributing in other ways, in scoring goals. So I think that's the hope, is that yes, maybe Benteke's at 10, 11 goals, by mid-season, but you've also got, a couple guys with 3, 4, 5 that are out there. And, actually, we're not looking for another player to have 10 goals this year. We're looking for just, attack-minded players to have Pirani getting 6 goals while starting, by the halfway part of the season would be fantastic and amazing. So
I agree. Finally, what is a realistic season outcome? Because when I look at the East, you guys were tied, but but that was with Atlanta. And Atlanta retooled Major League this offseason. I don't see them as a 9th place team. I think it's disappointing if they're outside the top 3. Not only where can you finish, because I think this roster did get a little better in the offseason. At least I see a little more clearly now. And I think that, if the defense can be shored up, you're right there. But can you push into the 9, 8, 7? Did you get much better than other squads? So what is a realistic outcome? What is the team's best possible outcome? And what do you think the team's worst possible outcome?
I have the philosophy that every MLS team, if everything they do in the offseason goes their, or most of the things in the offseason goes their way, they're seventh or better every single season. So, I mean, I think finishing seventh is like the goal for this team and should be the goal for this team. I think probably within that 7, 8, 9 is probably like, if I'm being realistic, that's probably where they end up falling this year. The East is also exceedingly difficult. There's a lot of teams that have gotten a lot better, a lot of different, a lot of teams that have just they've gotten better. And you talked about Atlanta, you talked about, Chicago has, a new direction and they have the room to do it. It's not going to be easy to make the playoffs this year. I think maybe the part disappointment is that this feels still like kind of a rebuilding year. So it might be another season before we're actually, back. So back. And we'll see. It's always predicting MLS is always a crapshoot, and everybody can look good and then everything can fall apart and everything can look terrible and everything comes together. So it's always that big thing. There may be like the teams in the top 3 are going to be the teams in the top 3. Everything else is a crapshoot. So
you're saying that to the guy who works for Bet US as a Major League Soccer expert.
I don't know how you do it, man. I don't know how you do it.
Poorly, apparently. No, we're out there, fighting a good fight, and part of it is just about seeing things clearly, not being too up on one team because you like them or down on one team because you like them. But part of this is doing these 30 season previews. And hey, if you're doing this along with me and watching all 30 episodes, you can be an MLS expert too, because we are bringing guys from, some of the best voices from Major League Soccer. Today was Ted Meyer from RFK Refugees. Ted, thank you again for being here with us today.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And guys, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you go to your favorite podcast app. You can just search Major League Soccer because we're up in the top 5 now, but you can also type in the Designated Pundits and find our podcast there. Thank you so much for watching and have a great night.